The desperate call. The distress signal echoed through the void of space, bouncing from one relay station to another, searching for anyone who would listen. The Volteri were desperate. Their once thriving worlds were now graveyards, their people hunted like animals by a species that knew no mercy, the Karath. The Karath were monsters, towering creatures covered in thick armor plates, with claws that could rip through steel. They did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They only conquered. For months, the Volteri had begged the galaxy for help. They sent messages to the great empires, the Xilorians, the Drax, even the neutral traders of the Orvan Collective. But no one answered. No one wanted to risk angering the Karath. Finally, with nowhere else to turn, the Volteri made a final call, a desperate plea. They reached out to the most unpredictable species in the known galaxy. They called the humans. The human answer. The Volteri Command Council sat in their dimly lit war room, watching the holographic display. Their leader, High Chancellor Marin, a tall, silver-skinned alien with deep-set eyes, clenched his hands together. "Do you think they will come?" he asked. No one answered. The humans were unpredictable. Some said they were a violent species, ruled by war and bloodshed. Others claimed they were protectors, beings who fought for justice. But there was one thing every species agreed on. Humans were dangerous. Suddenly, a light flashed on the display. A response. The humans had answered. A rough voice came through the speakers, speaking in the common trade language. "We received your distress call. Confirm the situation." Chancellor Maron's breath caught in his throat. He leaned forward. "The Karath are destroying us. They have taken 3 of our worlds. No one has been able to stop them." A brief silence. Then the human voice spoke again. "Send us the details. We're on our way." The transmission ended. No negotiations, no demands, just a promise. The Volteri Council members looked at each other in confusion. "That's it," one of them whispered. "They didn't even ask for a reward," another murmured. Chancellor Maron exhaled. The humans were coming. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, he didn't know. Arrival of the Deadliest. 2 days later, the Volteri stood on the landing platform of their last stronghold, waiting. Their sky was a dark red, the result of the burning colonies that had fallen to the Karath. The air smelled of smoke and death. Then a shadow passed overhead. A human warship descended from the clouds, sleek and black, its surface covered in strange markings, battle scars from wars fought in distant parts of the galaxy. It landed without ceremony, its engines hissing as the metal ramp extended. A group of humans stepped out. There weren't many, only a dozen. The Volteri had expected an army. They got something else. The human leading the group was tall, his face lined with experience. His eyes were cold, scanning everything, calculating. His armor was scratched, his weapon well worn. This was not a diplomat. This was a warrior. Chancellor Marin stepped forward hesitantly. "You are the human military?" he asked. The man smirked. "Something like that." Maron's eyes flickered to the others. Some were tall, some were short, but all carried themselves with the same air of quiet confidence. One woman had a scar running down her cheek. Another had a cybernetic arm. These were not ordinary soldiers. Where is your army?" Marin asked, confused. The human leader chuckled. "You don't need an army. You need us." Marin didn't understand. How can so few of you defeat the Karath? The human smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because we don't fight like you." The weight of a name. Another Volteri general, standing behind Marin, whispered, "What is your name?" The human leader glanced at him, then simply said, "Graves." The way he said it sent a chill down their spines. Marin straightened. "If you can stop the Karath, we will owe humanity a great debt." Graves shook his head. "We're not here for favors. We're here to win." One of the other humans, a tall woman with dark eyes, grinned. And trust me, we never lose. The Valtteri didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. The hunt begins. The humans wasted no time. They didn't ask for meetings, didn't request supplies. They simply requested one thing: information on the Karath stronghold. As the Valtteri watched from a safe distance, the humans examined maps, studied battle reports, and checked their weapons. They moved like hunters, their eyes sharp, their hands steady. One of them, a man with a thick beard, loaded his rifle and muttered, "These Karath think they're the apex predators." Graves checked his blade, his voice calm and steady. "Then it's time we remind them. Humans were born to hunt." And with that, the team vanished into the night. The battle for the Valtteri had begun. The Valtteri had expected an army, a fleet of warships, battalions of soldiers, towering machines of destruction. Instead, they got 12 humans. And somehow, that terrified them more. The fear of the unknown. Chancellor Meron watched the humans closely as they prepared for battle. There was something unsettling about them. They did not move with the rigid discipline of a traditional army, nor did they engage in long, drawn-out strategy meetings. They simply studied the enemy data, made a few quiet remarks to each other, and began checking their weapons. There was an ease to them, a quiet confidence that made Meron uneasy. The Valtteri had spent years building advanced defense systems, analyzing enemy weaknesses, and crafting complex battle plans. These humans seemed to operate on instinct. One of the younger Valtteri officers, General Savas, leaned toward Meron. His voice was low, nervous. "Chancellor, are we certain these humans can defeat the Karath?" Meron had no answer. Across the war room, the human leader, Graves, studied a holographic projection of the Karath fortress. His expression was unreadable. Next to him, his second-in-command, Ramirez, checked her rifle while chewing on something that smelled unpleasant. Finally, Graves spoke. "The Karath fight with brute force. They rely on overwhelming numbers, thick armor, and fear. That's their weakness." A Valtteri strategist scoffed. "They have crushed every army that stood against them." "What weakness?" Graves looked up. "They've never fought us." His voice was calm, but the weight behind it sent a chill through the room. The hunters move. The humans move out under the cover of night, their figures blending into the darkness. The Valtteri had offered them transport ships, but they refused. They said they preferred to go in quiet. Meron and his generals watched through drone feeds as the humans disappeared into the rocky terrain outside the Karath stronghold. The Karath had stationed patrols, large, heavily armed squads that stomped through the area, their massive forms barely concealed by the darkness. The first kill was silent. A Karath warrior, 8 feet tall and covered in thick bone-like plating, stopped near a ridge, sniffing the air. Something was wrong. His 3 eyes darted around, scanning the darkness. Then, in an instant, a blade slid across his throat. The Valtteri watching the feed gasped. The human, Ramirez, had appeared behind the Karath like a ghost, cutting through its armor as if it were nothing. The Karath gurgled, eyes wide in shock, and collapsed without making a sound. The rest of the human team moved with the same deadly precision. They didn't attack in waves. They didn't use brute force. They hunted. The lone Karath guard turned his head, only to be dragged into the shadows, a muffled crunch signaling his end. A patrol of 5 warriors paused to scan their surroundings, only for one of them to suddenly drop. A hole burned through his skull from a silent sniper shot. The Valtteri war room was silent as they watched. One of the generals swallowed hard. They are like predators." Meron whispered, "No, they are worse." The terror spreads. Within an hour, the Karath fortress was in chaos. The humans had not launched an assault. They had not bombed the base. They had made the Karath afraid. The alien warriors, once confident in their strength, were now panicking. Shadows moved in the dark. Voices whispered in their ears. Their own comrades fell without warning, their bodies vanishing into the night. The Karath were used to overwhelming their enemies, crushing them under sheer numbers. But numbers meant nothing when you couldn't see your enemy. One Karath commander bellowed, ordering his troops to hold their ground. "Face them. They are only a handful." A voice crackled over their stolen comms. "A handful is all we need." The Karath commander turned, eyes wide. The humans had hijacked their communication systems. They were inside the fortress. And then the real slaughter began. The horror of humanity. The Valteri could only watch as the humans cut through the Karath like ghosts in a nightmare. A human named Bishop carried a shotgun that roared like thunder, tearing through armor with explosive rounds. A Karath warrior lunged at him, only for Bishop to step aside and drive a combat knife between its ribs, twisting it with a cold efficiency. Ramirez moved like a shadow, using the Karath's own bulk against them, weaving between their attacks and striking where their armor was weakest. Graves was the worst of them. He fought with the precision of someone who had done this too many times before, every shot, every movement calculated. At one point, he faced a towering Karath warlord, a creature that had slaughtered entire battalions. The warlord roared and charged. Graves didn't flinch. He sidestepped at the last moment, slammed a blade into the warlord's exposed neck, and pulled the trigger on a pistol pressed against its skull. The massive creature collapsed, dead before it hit the ground. The humans did not fight like an army. They fought like something far worse. They fought like killers. The Karath break. The battle lasted only a few hours, but by the end, the Karath were in full retreat. The fortress that had stood for decades was burning, its once mighty warriors fleeing into the wilderness. For the first time in their history, the Karath knew fear. One of the surviving Karath officers, captured and thrown to the ground, looked up at Graves. His body shook, his mandibles clicking nervously. "You?" the Karath rasped. "You are demons." Graves crouched down, his expression unreadable. "No," he said quietly. "We're human." He stood up and turned to his team. "We're done here." The humans walked away, leaving the battlefield behind. The Valteri, watching from the war room, were left in stunned silence. Finally, General Savas whispered, "Are all humans like this?" Maron exhaled slowly. "I hope not." The Karath had ruled through fear. They crushed planets, burned cities, and slaughtered species who dared to resist. But for the first time, the Karath were the ones running, and humans did not let prey escape. Echoes of a massacre. Chancellor Maron stood in the Valteri war room, watching the battlefield through drone footage. His people had expected an army to defeat the Karath. Instead, 12 humans had done what no one else had ever managed. The fortress that once stood as an unbreakable symbol of Karath dominance was now a smoldering ruin. The few surviving Karath had flowed into the wastelands, their massive forms stumbling, their armor cracked, their confidence shattered. A message had spread across the Karath ranks. The humans are not soldiers. They are something far worse. Maron shivered. He had seen wars before, but never like this. The humans did not fight for honor or glory. They fought to win. One of his officers, General Savas, watched the drone feeds with haunted eyes. They didn't just defeat them, they broke them. Maron nodded, but something still troubled him. The battle was over. So why were the humans still here? No escape for the enemy. The Valteri expected the humans to rest after the battle. Instead, they prepared for the next phase. Graves stood at the edge of the ruined fortress, scanning the burning wasteland beyond. His team was gathering supplies, checking weapons, and speaking in hushed tones. Maron approached cautiously. "Commander Graves, the Karath are retreating. Their forces are broken. Why are you still here?" Graves didn't look away from the horizon. "Because they're still alive." Maron hesitated. "You mean the survivors?" Graves nodded. "The Karath aren't just warriors. They're predators. You don't leave a wounded predator alive. If you do, it comes back stronger. Marin swallowed hard. You intend to hunt them down. Graves finally turned to face him, his expression unreadable. We don't leave a job half done. The hunt begins. The surviving Karath had fled deep into the wastelands, an unforgiving landscape of jagged rocks, deadly storms, and endless darkness. It was a place where most creatures would die within days. But the Karath were not most creatures. They were massive, built for war, and desperate to survive. They moved in small groups, using the shadows for cover, knowing that if they could just escape this world, they could rebuild. They thought they were safe. They were wrong. The humans moved like ghosts. They tracked footprints invisible to the untrained eye. They followed blood trails that the Valtteri drones couldn't detect. They read the land, understanding every sign of movement, every shift in the wind. The first group of Karath survivors, 6 warriors, had barely stopped to rest when death found them. A sharp whistle cut through the air. One Karath warrior lifted his head in confusion. Then his skull exploded. The others barely had time to react before the next shot came. Another dropped, his body convulsing. The rest panicked, roaring in fury, firing their weapons wildly into the darkness. Nothing. Then, from the shadows, a voice. Cold. Amused. Wasting ammo. The Karath spun just in time to see Graves stepping out of the darkness, his rifle raised. A single shot rang out. The last Karath fell. A nightmare without end. The survivors of the massacre had scattered, splitting into smaller groups, hoping to increase their chances of survival. It didn't matter. The humans found them all. One by one. Ramirez stalked a wounded Karath through the canyons, waiting until it collapsed from exhaustion before stepping forward. It tried to fight back. She dodged easily, sliding her knife under its throat. Bishop ambushed another group at night, setting up tripwires and explosives that turned their camp into a death trap. The few who tried to crawl away found themselves staring down the barrel of his shotgun. Even the Valtteri, watching from their ships, were horrified. The Karath had massacred their people, but even they had never been hunted like this. The humans weren't fighting a war anymore. They were exterminating a threat. The Karath's last stand. The final Karath warlord stood atop a rocky ridge, watching his forces die one by one. He had never known fear before. Now, it was all he knew. His forces had once numbered in the thousands. Now, less than 20 remained. They had no ships, no way to call for help. The humans had cut them off from everything. They were trapped. The warlord turned to his last warriors. His voice was strained, desperate. We must fight. We must kill them before they kill us. No one answered. Then, a single object landed in the center of their group. A small blinking device. A human voice crackled from it. Run. The explosion lit up the wasteland. The end of the Karath. The last Karath warrior stumbled through the wreckage. His armor shattered, his weapon lost. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath. Footsteps approached. Slow. Deliberate. He looked up. Graves stood over him, his rifle lowered. The Karath warrior trembled. Why? He rasped. Why do you hunt us? Graves tilted his head. You thought you were the apex predators. He raised his weapon. You were wrong. A single shot ended the Karath species on this world. The hunt was over. A warning to the galaxy. Days later, as the humans prepared to leave, Chancellor Marin stood before them. He struggled to find the right words. You have saved us, he finally said. But you terrify me. Graves smiled slightly. Good. Marin hesitated. If the Karath had surrendered, would you have spared them? Graves didn't answer immediately. Then he simply said, We don't fight wars. We end them. The Valtteri would never forget those words. As the human warship lifted off, disappearing into the void, a message was sent across the galaxy. To all who threaten humanity's allies, run. Because if the humans came for you, There would be no escape. The war was over. The Karath were gone, wiped out, hunted to the last survivor. The Volteri had been saved. Their cities would be rebuilt. Their people could live without fear. But even as their world returned to peace, one truth remained. The humans had not just defeated the Karath. They had erased them. And that terrified the galaxy. A galaxy in shock. Word of the massacre spread faster than light. Every major species, every ruling empire, every hidden warlord received the same chilling report. The Karath Empire, destroyed. Not by fleets, not by grand armies, but by 12 humans. The Galactic Council convened an emergency meeting. Leaders from across the stars gathered in the towering halls of the neutral zone, their voices frantic, their fear barely concealed. The Xilorian ambassador, his crystalline form shimmering under the chamber's lights, spoke first. The Karath were unstoppable. No force had ever truly challenged them. A Drax warlord slammed a fist on the table. And now they are gone. How? How can so few have done what entire fleets failed to do? A silence settled over the room. Finally, a pale-skinned Orvan diplomat whispered, "They are not an army. They are something else. They do not fight wars. They hunt." The room darkened as a hologram flickered to life, the last recorded footage of the battle. A grainy image of humans moving through the shadows. A Karath warrior being pulled into the darkness. Another shot through the skull before he could scream. The final moments of the last warlord, kneeling, pleading, before a single gunshot silenced him forever. The footage ended. No one spoke. Then, from the back of the chamber, a deep voice rumbled. "They are monsters." All heads turned. The speaker was Supreme Commander Varix of the Torvani Dominion. His reptilian features were unreadable, his golden eyes cold. He leaned forward, his claws tapping against the metal table. "Do any of you truly believe," he said, "that the humans will stop here?" Back on Volteri Prime, while the galaxy trembled, the humans prepared to leave. Graves and his team stood on a landing pad, their ship's engines humming behind them. Their job was done. But the Volteri were not celebrating. Chancellor Meron approached, his silver skin dull with exhaustion. He had spent days overseeing the rebuilding efforts, yet sleep had not come to him. The same question haunted him. Had they invited something worse than the Karath into their home? He looked at Graves, the human leader who had saved his people, and slaughtered an entire species without hesitation. "Your mission is over," Meron said. "But tell me, Graves, do you feel victorious?" Graves glanced at his team. Some were joking quietly, checking their weapons, preparing for the next job. Others were silent, lost in thought. Finally, he turned back to Meron. "Victory isn't something we feel," he said. "It's just something that happens." Meron hesitated. "Then what do you feel?" Graves exhaled, staring up at the sky. "Hungry." Meron's blood turned cold. A debt to humanity. As the humans prepared to board their ship, General Savas stepped forward. Unlike Meron, he did not fear them. He admired them. "Human," he said, addressing Graves, "our people will not forget what you've done. If ever you have need of us, the Volteri will answer." Graves studied him for a moment. Careful with promises like that. Savas smirked. "We keep our word." The human leader nodded, then turned toward his ship. The rest of his team followed, and within moments, the sleek black vessel lifted into the sky, vanishing into the void. The Volteri were alone once more. Meron turned to Savas. "Do you truly believe we should be in their debt?" Savas watched the sky for a long time before replying. "I believe," he said, "that it's better to be their friend than their enemy." A new fear. The humans were gone, but they had left something behind. The galaxy had always seen itself as a place of balance, great empires rising and falling, wars fought and won, peace negotiated through fragile diplomacy. The humans had shattered that illusion, because they had proven one terrifying truth. If humanity decided you were a threat, they would not just defeat you. They would erase you. The Council's decision. Weeks passed, but the fear did not fade. The Galactic Council reconvened. The question had changed. It was no longer about how the humans had destroyed the Karath. Now, it was about how to stop the humans before they became the next unstoppable force. Supreme Commander Varix of the Torvani spoke first. "We must act," he said, "before we are the ones being hunted." The Xilorian ambassador hesitated. "But they have done nothing against us." Varix's golden eyes gleamed. Yet, a silence settled over the chamber. Then, slowly, one by one, the leaders of the galaxy nodded in agreement. A decision was made. Humanity would be watched, studied, contained, and if necessary, eliminated. Humanity's response. The Galactic Council believed they were acting in secret. They were wrong. Aboard a hidden human station, deep in the void, Graves and his team sat in a dimly lit room. A single report flickered on the screen before them, classified intelligence from deep inside the Galactic Council. Ramirez leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "They're scared." Bishop chuckled. "They should be." Graves studied the report, his expression unreadable. "They think they can stop us," he murmured. No one spoke. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "Let them try. Fear is a dangerous thing." The Galactic Council had ruled the stars for centuries, maintaining balance through diplomacy, trade, and the occasional war. Empires rose and fell, but no single species had ever threatened the entire order. Until now, humanity had broken the balance, and the rest of the galaxy decided they had to be stopped. The Shadow Conspiracy. In a hidden chamber beneath the Galactic Council's headquarters, the most powerful leaders in the universe gathered. The room was filled with whispers, nervous glances, and barely concealed fear. At the head of the table sat Supreme Commander Varix of the Torvani Dominion, his golden reptilian eyes sharp. He was the only one who did not seem afraid, only angry. "The humans are a threat to all of us," he said, his voice low but firm. "We have seen what they are capable of. They do not wage war. They exterminate." The Orvan diplomat, his pale skin nearly translucent under the dim lights, shifted uneasily. "But they have not turned against us." "Yet," Varix snapped. "They eliminated the Karath with only 12 operatives. 12. Imagine if they sent a fleet. Imagine if they decided that we were next." Silence. Then, a voice from the darkness. "They must be contained." The room turned toward the speaker, the Xilorian High Chancellor. His crystalline body pulsed with a cold, calculated light. "Containment will not be enough," Varix growled. "They are predators. If we corner them, they will fight. If they fight, they will win." The Drax warlord, a towering mass of armored flesh, growled, "Then we kill them before they have the chance." The words hung in the air. No one disagreed. A plan was forming. The first strike. The galaxy moved faster than ever before. Treaties were signed in secret, fleets repositioned under the guise of routine maneuvers, spy networks activated. And all of it was directed at one target: Earth. The first attack was meant to be a warning, a test. A combined fleet of Council forces, led by the Torvani, entered human space. They did not declare war. They did not announce their presence. They simply opened fire. 3 human colonies, outposts on the edges of explored space, vanished in nuclear fire. Millions died. The Galactic Council expected humanity to hesitate, to retreat, to surrender. They had misunderstood everything. The response. The first mistake the Council made was assuming humanity did not see them coming. Because humanity knew. They had been watching, waiting, preparing. When the Council fleet fired on human colonies, they expected chaos. They expected humanity to plead for negotiations. Instead, they received a single transmission, a message broadcast to every ship, every station, every planet in Council space. A message from Earth's highest authority. You have fired the first shot. There will not be a second. And then the humans disappeared. Not a single fleet moved. Not a single transmission came from human space. It was as if they had simply vanished. The Council hesitated. Perhaps humanity was in shock. Perhaps they were too afraid to respond. They were wrong. The Ghost War begins. The first Council warship to go missing was the HFY Sovereign, a massive dreadnought patrolling the Torvani border. One moment, it was there. The next, it was gone. No distress signals. No debris. The next day, an Orvan intelligence station went silent. Then, an entire Drax supply fleet vanished without a trace. Panic spread through the Council's ranks. They had expected retaliation. They had expected a fleet, a declaration of war, something. But this was something else. The humans were not fighting a war. They were hunting. The fear spreads. Across the galaxy, the stories spread like wildfire. A Torvani admiral went to sleep on his flagship and never woke up. His body was found floating outside the ship, a single bullet wound in his skull. A Silurian warlord's private fortress, hidden beneath a frozen ocean, was reduced to rubble overnight. No alarms had gone off. No ships had been detected. Entire fleets refused to leave dock, terrified of venturing into human space. Varix, once so confident, found himself surrounded by fearful allies. "We must strike harder," he roared. "Bring our full fleets. Wipe them out." No one moved, because now, every leader in the Council had the same thought. What if the humans are already here? The fall of the Council's stronghold. The Council's greatest fortress was Citadel Prime, a massive, impenetrable station built into the heart of a dead star. It was the symbol of power, the seat of galactic authority, and it was where the Council gathered to plan humanity's destruction. They thought they were safe there, until the alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed. Security forces scrambled. Defensive turrets locked onto empty air. And then, the station went dark. Humanity strikes. In the silence, figures moved. Human operatives, unseen, unheard, slipped through the corridors. Weapons suppressed. Blades sharp. By the time the power returned, it was too late. The Council chambers were breached. Guards lay dead. Leaders, once powerful and untouchable, cowered in fear. And standing before them, Graves smiled. "You wanted to start a war," he said. "Now you're in one." Varix snarled, reaching for a weapon. A gunshot rang out. Varix collapsed, a hole between his golden eyes. Graves turned to the remaining Council members. "You fired the first shot," he said. "You thought you could kill us before we became a threat." He stepped closer, voice low and cold. "You should have aimed better. The war ends before it begins." The Galactic Council surrendered. It took only one night. The leaders who had plotted humanity's downfall were either dead or kneeling. Their fleets, paralyzed by fear, refused to engage. Humanity had won, without ever fielding an army, without firing a single fleet-to-fleet battle, because they never played by the Council's rules. The message was clear. You don't fight humans. You don't threaten humans. You don't even think about attacking humans. Because if you do, you won't even see them coming. A new order. The war that never truly began was over. The Galactic Council, once the most powerful force in the universe, now bowed before humanity. But Earth did not demand planets. They did not demand riches. They only gave one command: leave us alone. And the galaxy obeyed, because they knew. The next time humanity went to war, there would be no survivors. The war was over. Or at least, that's what the galaxy told itself. The Galactic Council had fallen without a single fleet battle. The most powerful empires had been brought to their knees, not through brute force, but through terror. Humanity had become a ghost in the dark, a force that did not wage war, but ended it before it began. The surviving leaders of the council had surrendered in the silence of Citadel Prime, kneeling before the same humans they had once sought to destroy. And then, humanity left. No occupation, no new empire, no demands, only a simple warning. Do not try this again. But fear does not fade so easily. And in the void, a new kind of war was beginning. The Council's secret rebirth. The Galactic Council no longer ruled. Their fleets were scattered. Their leaders had been hunted like prey. But they were not finished. Hidden in the depths of a forgotten system, the remaining council members gathered in secret. The Torvani, the Xilorians, the Orvans, the Drax. The last remnants of the great empire sat around a dimly lit war table, their voices hushed with fear and anger. Varix was dead. The Torvani Dominion was without its supreme commander, but his successor, Lord General Sarvik, was not as reckless. He had seen what happened when they underestimated humanity. "They think we are broken," Sarvik said, his reptilian eyes glinting. "They believe we will not dare to strike again." The Orvan diplomat, his pale skin shimmering in the low light, shifted uneasily. "Would you?" Sarvik's claws tapped against the metal table. "No." A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Sarvik leaned forward. "We cannot fight them with fleets. We cannot outthink them. But war is not always about firepower." He turned his gaze to the Xilorian Chancellor, whose crystalline body pulsed with intelligence. "What do you know of humanity's weaknesses?" The Xilorian hesitated. Then, slowly, a twisted smile formed on his glowing face. "They are few," he admitted, "but they do exist." The shadows of the room seemed to darken. A new plan was forming. Not a war of fleets, not a war of armies, but a war fought in the shadows. The assassination attempt. It started small. A human diplomat was found dead on a neutral station, his body rigged to explode, taking 20 others with him. A military transport carrying classified intelligence vanished in deep space. No distress calls, no wreckage, only an empty void. Then, a sleeper agent was discovered on Mars, a high-ranking officer in the United Earth Navy, secretly working for the Council. Humanity had spent years being the predator. Now someone else was hunting them. Earth's response. The deaths. The disappearances. The betrayals. Humanity did not react with rage. They did not send fleets. They did not make threats. Instead, the intelligence agencies of Earth, silent, unseen, began their own hunt. The first agent was found on Europa, hiding within an asteroid mining colony. He was not captured. He was not interrogated. He simply disappeared. The second was found on a trade station orbiting Proxima Centauri. One moment, he was making a report. The next, his body was found floating in the vacuum of space. His throat slit. The third, an Orvan handler, tried to escape. He fled to a distant moon, hidden under false identities. But when he entered his safe house, he found someone waiting for him. A single human operative, seated in the darkness. The Orvan barely had time to scream before the knife was in his chest. The hunters had become the hunted. The final warning. The secret war lasted only a few months. It ended the way all conflicts with humanity did, silently, ruthlessly, and without mercy. One by one, the Council's assassins vanished. Their spies were found dead. Their operatives stopped reporting, until, at last, a single transmission reached the Council's hidden stronghold. A message, a warning, a simple video sent from an unknown source. It showed Lord General Sarvik, the mastermind behind the new plan. He was seated in his private war chamber, unaware of the figure standing behind him, a human. The room fell into silence as the video played. The human leaned close to Sarvik's ear and whispered a single sentence. Then, before the Council's horrified eyes, Sarvik's head snapped to the side, his body collapsing lifelessly to the floor. The screen went dark. A single message remained. You tried this once. You tried it twice. There will not be a third. The Council's remaining leaders sat frozen in fear, because they understood. This was not a war they could win. It never had been. The galaxy's new reality. The war was over, truly, this time. The Council was shattered beyond repair. Its leaders lived in exile, too afraid to move against humanity ever again. And across the stars, a new kind of peace settled over the galaxy. Not a peace forged by treaties, not a peace built on alliances, but a peace created by the knowledge that if humanity wanted you dead, you would never see it coming. The other species learned to adapt. They no longer saw humans as equals. They saw them as something else entirely. A force of nature, a shadow that loomed over the galaxy, a predator that did not fight wars, because there was no need. One final conversation. Years later, on a distant world, a young alien child looked up at the stars and asked his father a question. Are the humans real? The father hesitated, then nodded. Yes. The child frowned. But if they are real, why do we never see them? The father placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered, because if you ever see a human, it's already too late. The war that never truly began had ended. The Galactic Council was gone, its remnants scattered, its leaders too afraid to act. The great empires that once ruled the stars had learned a simple, terrifying truth. Humanity was untouchable, not because they had the largest fleets, not because they had the most powerful weapons, but because they fought differently. They did not conquer, they did not demand. They simply made sure their enemies never had the chance to fight back. And so, the galaxy changed, not through treaties, not through diplomacy, but through fear. The silent galaxy. Trade still flowed. Colonies still grew. Wars between lesser species still erupted. But one rule was now unspoken and absolute. No one touched human space. The systems of Earth, Mars, Titan, and the countless other human colonies had become like dark waters, silent, undisturbed, avoided by all. Merchant ships from alien worlds were allowed, but always watched. Diplomats came, but never overstayed. Because everyone knew the stories, the whispers, the disappearances. The last time a council fleet attacked a human colony, it vanished in the dark. The last time spies tried to infiltrate the United Earth government, they were found with their throats slit. The last time a leader spoke openly about moving against humanity, his entire family disappeared overnight. It was not a government that enforced this, not an army, but something far more terrifying. The silent hand of humanity. The hunter's last mission. Deep in the void, a single human ship drifted in the darkness. Inside, Colonel Adrian Graves, leader of Earth's elite covert forces, sat in silence. The mission was over. The war was over. For years, he had been a shadow, eliminating threats before they could rise, ending wars before they began. And now there was no one left to hunt. He looked at the final report in front of him. The last remnants of the Galactic Council had gone into hiding, scattered across the farthest reaches of space. No ships, no armies, no threats. They would never return. They were too afraid. Graves exhaled and leaned back. His body ached from decades of war. His mind, sharp as ever, felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Rest. A soft chime echoed through the ship. A message. Graves frowned and activated the screen. A single line of text appeared. The galaxy is afraid of us. But what happens when they fear something even more? His blood went cold. Because humanity had always been the predator, the monster in the dark. But now someone was suggesting that there was something worse. And if that was true, humanity would have to be the hunters once again. The forgotten signal. Far beyond human space, in the ruins of an ancient station, something stirred. A long-dead satellite, buried under dust and ice, flickered to life. Its systems, older than the council itself, hummed as they detected movement. Something was waking up. Something old. Something powerful. And as the signal pulsed outward, reaching into the cold void of space, one final message was transmitted. A warning. A name. A forgotten nightmare that even the oldest empires had tried to erase. The screen displayed 2 words. 2 words that would change everything. They're coming. A new threat rises. For the first time in years, the galaxy would turn to humanity. Not as enemies. Not as prey. But as the only ones ruthless enough to fight whatever was coming. Because if something could make the galaxy fear it more than humanity, then it was something that should not exist. And this time, humanity would not be waiting in the shadows. They would be standing at the front. Not as assassins. Not as ghosts. But as warriors. As the defenders of everything. And the galaxy would finally understand the true meaning of an old human phrase. Be careful what you wish for.